Never expected what remained to be the same, but we're the same. the same, we're all the same, we're all the same.
Oh, from New York, you are watching a Extra Time postgame show driven by Continental from my apartment in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. I'm Andrew Wiebe with my partners in soccer, David Goss, Calen, Carr, Matt Doyle. Back to MLS Cup, the Columbus Crew go. Their third time ever, their first time since 2015, and they are playing at map-free stadium, baby, and they've done that before. Didn't go the way they wanted, but guess who's coaching them now? Exactly. Caleb Porter got the win that one. He's trying to go double up on this. Saved the Crew indeed. I mean, I remember not so long ago, this Crew was in complete disarray, and I said Crew, I meant team, but it still applies. They held on to their team. They were the best team in the Eastern Conference, I think, this year from start to finish, despite that little blip that they had toward the end of the season. And now they're going back, a 1-0 win against the Revs. Artur, all he does, late season goals, nice little side foot inside the post. We're here to break it down. Of course, we're going to push ahead and talk about Seattle, Minnesota tomorrow on FS1 at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. That will decide who they play in their home. And then MLS Cup, Saturday, December 12th, 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox Unimas, TUDN, TSN, and TVA. Who wants to start? Who's got something boiling inside of them? What is the take? What is the feeling? Where are we at? How do we feel?
I will start. I will say on the pregame show, Calen and I talked about this, how when the Revs are able to get on the ball in midfield and dictate the pace of the game and the rhythm of the game, they're so dangerous. And they only were able to do that for like maybe a 10-minute stretch of the first half. And the rest of it, it was the Crew just being a much better team, and you're seeing there that was a nice little counterattack moment. Buxa chose to go near post, which is apparently his choice every single time. But then the Crew were like that. That was the only time it felt like the Revs were gonna break things down. And this, I don't want to say it precisely felt inevitable, but it was not a surprise at all to see Columbus get on the board, and the fact that they did it off a recycled set piece, which is, again, another thing Calen and I talked about on the pregame show. It went according to script. It went according to script in this game.
It was going to take that to beat Matt Turner in this game. That is just a delicious side foot, outside in finish. But watching it back, I guess I didn't appreciate the Jonathan Mensah pullback as much as I should have. On the fly, first time, right into stride, beautiful. You see them lifting the cup. They're jacked about it. They know they get to stay home. They get to sleep in their own beds. They get to make sure they're prepared. Calen, from what you thought might happen to what happened, how did they match or not match?
Yeah, I mean, I think Matt and I did a pretty good job in the pregame, and look, you don't always know
the winners today were Calen, Carr, and Matt Doyle, and then Columbus.
Right. Well, I just felt that so much of the Revs was going to be about Carlos Hill and being on the ball and getting as much of it as possible. And in the midfield, they made it a little bit difficult for him, where he had to come back and search for the ball quite a bit. He had to pick it up in different spots far away from goal. whereas Zelarayan was going to be able to be a lot more advanced in the attack, get into these dangerous spots in between the lines because they have Nagbe, because they have Artur. And you heard Caleb Porter talk about it at halftime, where he was saying they were really trying to suck Polster and Caldwell out, so that would create a little bit more space for him. And that's exactly what happened, where he was able to get into those spots, they had possession of the ball. They had almost all of the ball through large stretch of the game. So, I mean, the goal itself was really well taken, especially from the technique to lay that ball off from your center back. And then even here, to let the ball come across your body and have the patience to take that with the inside of your foot from Artur. And even still, Matt Turner gets a fingertip to this. And this ball looks from that other angle. It looks like it's actually going wide when he first hits the ball, and it kind of tails just a little bit, tucks right inside that post. But it had to be inch perfect to beat Matt Turner, and it still only beat him by a fingertip. That's how good Matt Turner has been throughout the playoffs. That's how good he was early in this match. And that was the small margins that the Crew were able to take advantage of, and they hit that inch perfect goal that will send them to host MLS Cup.
And you're talking about a Crew team. Well, yeah, I'm saying you're talking about a Crew team where you come into this game, you could say these are 5 guys who are going to win this game. And it wasn't one of them in Artur to score the final goal. Mensah sets him up. But that whole thing came because Zelarayan had just set Zardes up on a chance that he should have finished. And then Turner makes the save. And because the plays in the attack, it all recycles. Zelarayan gets it and puts this cross in. But because there are so many weapons, at some point someone else can pop up because you're kind of covering and putting out fires with everyone else throughout the game. I thought Pedro Santos was great again in this game, and Zelarayan kind of disappeared for little stretches. Santos floated inside and would pick up the ball. He's good counter pressing. He helps defensively, especially with Carlos Hill. And Tajon Buchanan really I think he had one cross, and really that was the only moment he was in the attack the whole game. So that was all fantastic work from him as well. And it just, for this Crew team, I don't really think they've gotten in 5th gear in the playoffs. They've kind of sat in 3rd and 4th, and they were able to beat the Red Bulls, and they were able to beat Nashville. And now here again, I thought this was their best game of the playoffs, but it wasn't the best we could see Columbus play. But because they're so talented, it's enough to get them to an MLS Cup and host it.
Watching those highlights back, I mean, there's so many little wrinkles of that play, and I know maybe this is something you're going to break down later, Doyle. I'm not sure if you had that one saved up for us. But I also think about, and you go back to the weapons. It's not just the layback, it's not the cross, it's not the finish. I mean, there are 2 center backs sandwiching Gyasi Zardes that cannot step. I mean, look how close Kessler gets, and he doesn't move off. Both those guys get pushed in centrally and open up that lane and open up basically a 2v1, and Polster doesn't get back in time to cover Artur, you have to say that. But it helps with the opportunity, and that goes back to just all these different pieces. And if you look at that starting 11 for Columbus, other than Eloy Room, it's exactly who Caleb Porter would want to be out there. And that's half of the battle in 2020, right? Is having your guys, despite what the Crew have gone through with the medically not cleared to play players, is having the team that you want at the time that you want it. And from day one, Caleb Porter said this is where they want to be. And I thought he stuck to his form in the post-game interview where he just said he seemed kind of nonplussed, to be honest with you. You would think he'd have a little bit more emotion, a little bit more excitement, given what it took to get here. And Gyasi Zardes did have that. You could kind of feel it in his voice of like, God, what a year. I can't believe we're here. Caleb Porter is still, as he should be, laser focused on the goal. And it just so happens that despite that stretch from, late September through about late October, it was basically an exact month where they lost 4 times, they drew twice, and they only won once. And we were saying, oh, God, they fell off. This Crew team is not who they once were. I mean, they're back, and you're right, Dave. I don't think they've hit on all cylinders. I don't think they've been at their best. But no matter who gets through, they're probably going to have to be, because I think the test is going to be a little bit more stringent, especially if it's the Sounders come December 12th.
I mean, probably, right? I think we all probably still agree that the Sounders are the best team in the league, though it's tough to say a team on the road would be the favorite. And, of course, they still have to beat Minnesota, who are the massive favorites tomorrow night.
Oh, God.
But, we kind of touched on it. I think David touched on it in particular, that, like, Zelarayan has the luxury to drift out of this game a little bit. Carlos Hill doesn't have that. Carlos Hill has to, and it's in large part, it's because of how Gustavo Bo plays. With the way the Revs line up, it's a 4-2-3-1, and Bo was in the middle of that 3, except he doesn't come back and do the defensive work. He doesn't get on the ball and do any possession work. He just sort of hangs around up top and tries to find chances. So if you're in a situation where you're dominating the ball and you're able to conduct the game, he is absolutely going to be an asset. But in a game like this, where, I mean, the Crew were just a much better team from the kick, really. Bo, like, I think he was a net negative for this team. So with the Revs, you have one DP in Bo who is not affecting the game at all. You have another in Buxa who is probably not a DP caliber player, hasn't shown it yet this year or at all this year. And then you have Heel, who all of it ends up, I don't want to say all of it, but like most of it ends up falling on him. And he had kind of a rough game. He had that one great pass that put Buxa into the open field. But other than that, his touches were sloppy. And the other thing is that, again, with the way the Revs are constructed, if you're Columbus, you don't have to worry about Gustavo Bo in the buildup. So you could focus extra hard on Carlos Heel and make it that much more difficult on him. And I think the sort of the knock-on effect of that was maybe at times Polster and Caldwell trying to do too much, getting pulled upfield a little bit, and that opening things up for the second ball. And that really did set the tone for the first 65 minutes of this game. Now, obviously, after it went 1-0 to the Crew, the game kind of changed. But for the most part, Columbus were the much better team in this game. And actually, let's just take a look at the goal. Let's just break down the goal just so we can see what happened on here. This is Zelarayan on the ball, and that's Mensah drifting to the back post. Buchanan does not realize Mensah is that far behind him, and Matt Polster has forgotten about Artur. And they just react a little bit too late. And that is – look, Columbus had the ability to win a game with the margins that tight, just because the Revs are kind of poor on defending set pieces. The Revs didn't have that ability. The margins were not that. The margins were larger for Columbus on the defensive side. So if you have that, and then you have your DPs really not putting in the type of performance you need, you're never going to feel dangerous. And that's exactly what happened. And I'm putting some of this on the Revs themselves, but a lot of this does go down to the Columbus Crew playing an excellent game of soccer. Remember, the first 15 games of the year, they gave up 4 goals. It was that type of defensive performance again, and they are absolutely worthy of going into the MLS Cup and hosting it.
We're going to dive into the Revs a little bit more later, and Bruce Arena had an interesting quote in his postgame basically saying that they're looking to bring in 2 to 3 players that can solidify the first 11. I mean, that's starters. So we'll try to figure out where those might be and who they might be looking for, what kind of profiles in that position. Let's kind of broaden it a little bit and take it out, sort of the bird's eye view on this, because we're really digging into the nitty gritty. But ultimately, the Columbus Crew got back to the MLS Cup for the 3rd time. They did it in a season that's been marred by a pandemic. They did it in a season in which they're dealing with that pandemic currently. What does this mean to this club, Dave? Because we were not so long ago, and even last year outside the playoffs, saying, is this team going to be in Columbus? I mean, there was real doubt about that, and now Tim Bezpachenko's arrived. Caleb Porter has arrived.
Calen.
They're not happy. It's fair. If you're watching that, I've been watching the YouTube stream. I didn't know if I wanted to say it to you, but they are really going in on the Austin FC hat.
Wow, that's fair. That's fair.
So Calen being the ultimate troll, obviously. Doyle would never do anything like that. He just likes to spike debate. When you look at Columbus, it obviously went poor in a lot of ways 2 years ago. And one of the things you look at when the Haslams took over and brought in Bezbachenko and Caleb Porter together was, one, how's this going to work for 2 guys who have never worked together, both learning the club at the same time, not really getting into this together? And 2, Greg Berhalter had left a team that was phenomenal on the field. So a lot had gone wrong off the field and had to be redirected. But what was the club going to look like? And Greg Berhalter takes over the national team. And last year was a tough year. But one of the things when I look at this game is how many starters were on the field that were a part of this team, either under Greg Berhalter or brought in last year by Tim Bezbachenko to build to this year. And so that's what impresses me about what's been done. They brought in Luis Diaz early. They kept Jonathan Mensah and Artur and Awful and Valenzuela, guys that, and Caleb Porter said in the postgame, I either had to bring in new guys or I had to talk to the guys about buying in and being a part of this. And the core of what happened today was a part of this earlier. And then they put the icing on top with Zelarayan and Caleb Porter. Sterlington Nagbe is going to be on the team at some point. And you knew that was going to happen. But when you look at the way they built this team, it was done the right way. And it was done over the course of time, but in about 18 months, which is fairly impressive in MLS terms. It shows you also there's talent on every roster if you just learn how to use it and put it in the right situation. So I think there's a ton of credit to everyone that's been involved, that's, taken over. And I think we've talked about a lot this year. Orlando is kind of like the heart of it, where ideas, belief, philosophy, all these things, if you point people in a direction together, they're going to be able to do something special. And a lot of MLS teams are floundering at times. And Columbus took over from a guy in Tim Bezbatchenko who got it done in Toronto and really saw how to rebuild a club, and a guy in Caleb Porter who won MLS Cup in Portland and knew what it took to win in this league. Both of them came in the same direction, and they didn't rush. They didn't panic at any point. And now you look at a team that, like I've said, they could beat you in different ways. I still don't think played their best, but yet they're in MLS Cup in a year that's wild. And they had 7 players who were unavailable for them over the course of the last 2 weeks and were canceling practices, and they still won in the playoffs. So this is a team that I think could be better in 2021 and could continue to get better going forward.
2021 is interesting too, and this game is interesting in where it will be played at Mapfre Stadium, which is just oozing with history. We've all been there for big games. I mean, I still think, even though the U.S. lost it, that game against Mexico a couple years ago, I'll never forget it. I was there for a Dos a 0 as well that sealed the U.S.'s place in the World Cup. But, I mean, this is hallowed grounds, and this could be the last game in these grounds, because I believe they're going into their new stadium in 2021, and maybe it's just like, the universe sort of coming together in the right way for everybody. And Calen, I know you pulled your hat around the other way, but Austin will also open up a soccer-specific stadium next year. So there's a little bit of like cosmic justice to this, to me, that the Crew are in this position, that they managed to, by the grace of their supporters and local support, survive and now thrive, and now they're here. What is Caleb Porter going to be thinking about, though, Doyle, for the next week? What's going to sort of occupy his brain? Because, I mean, the final whistle blew, and the man is not even, he can't, like, he's not letting go in any way. He's still in that mode of, like, next game. Like, I'm going to feed you this cliche, but it's exactly how I feel. So what's he thinking about?
Either Nico Ladero or Babello Reynoso. That's what he's going to be thinking about. I don't think he's going to spend any time thinking about the overall implications and the journey that the roster took or the team itself took. And I'm sure he has the fan base on his mind, but he's not going to be thinking about anything other than whichever team his Crew will be hosting at Mapfre Stadium. After that game, one way or another, he will have something else on his mind. But it has to be, I don't think teams that win these sort of things focus on anything other than the next game, which is why he was like, that wasn't an act on ABC when he was saying like, that's what he was, the answers he was giving, those were truthful. He just has to be laser focused. And the key, and Calen can talk to this, I'm sure, better than any of us, for MLS Cup week, is you want everyone to be laser focused, but loose at the same time. It's just another game, but it's also not just another game. And Calen, it's got to be really hard to sort of walk that tightrope.
Does loose exist this year? That's what I'm wondering. Like, you hear these guys talk about getting the texts and the cell phone calls and wondering, and where the Crew are right now, wondering if they're going to get bad news. Like, how could you be loose?
You're not going to be loose, but I actually think for a team like Columbus, they get that extra day of rest versus whoever's in the Western Conference. They don't have to travel. That's going to be a big thing. And they may get Eloy Room back as well. So that would be sort of my main focus looking ahead towards the next week is, can you reintegrate him into the team? And Tarbell, I think, was very solid. I don't think he was tested. He stood up in the moments where he had to, but he didn't have to be spectacular. And I think he's going to be a good soldier and fine to step aside where he says, hey, look, people get called up in all kinds of situations, especially this year, and did a fantastic job. And I think he'll be just as happy if they are able to lift that trophy to feel that he played a major part in that. So you look towards the next week specifically for Columbus, they get the day off and then they get to watch the next match. But I don't think they're going to change how they play very much. I know Taylor afterwards said that they had won in a multitude of ways. I just think they hit the back of the net early against Red Bull. I've seen pretty much the same team in as far as their approach, their style of play, the way they want to dominate the ball, no matter who they're playing against at home. And that's what I really like about this team is they have they're very disciplined. They are methodical. They will wait. They will break you down. I think Caleb Porter, he took what Berhalter did as far as their style of play, and a lot of coaches want to come in and blow it up and say we're going to do it a completely different way. They still play the same similar style. They've just made better decisions and have better pieces and have opened up the bank a little bit to maybe Higuain as Zelarayan, or you've got Finley and Miram, but then you've got Pedro Santos now here and Diaz on one side. Actually, those two are a little bit closer because I thought both those guys were top. But I think Nagbe is the piece that actually changes sort of the whole picture for them as far as the way that they're able to play and get the ball into advanced positions and really dominate that possession statistic consistently. So they've made themselves a better team. They're patient. They waited to the end of the game in against Nashville to get it done, but they didn't change the way they play. Today, it felt the same way. They were going to keep passing, moving, pass, move. You can even hear Caleb on the sideline talking about Darlington, get on it, each single play, keeping that possession moving quickly. So I don't think they're going to change the way they play against Seattle, Minnesota. They'll look for maybe some minor tweaks, and they have a pretty good path as far as how they handled Carlos Hill today. If they do go against a Reynoso specifically, they won't be able to focus as much on Ladero, I think, because of just the other weapons that Seattle has. But otherwise, I'd expect the Crew to focus on what they do well and to continue to do the same.
So we're going to pretend that Caleb Porter is not going to think about this week, but we can talk about it. How much does this matter for his legacy? He won an MLS Cup in Portland. That's huge. Caleb Porter wants to be in the Bruce Arena Bob Bradley conversations. How much does the next week matter for how you'll remember Caleb Porter?
I think a lot, actually, just because we talked about this a little bit in the pregame as far as just Caleb Porter's rise. And he was always thought of as this, sort of really, the way he got a college soccer team to play and the type of pros that he was producing. And, college soccer is not known for a beautiful style of play by any means. And he made it a winning style at that level too, whether it's recruiting and through the way he was training those guys. And then you wanted to see how that would transition to MLS. And then suddenly we saw I played against those early Portland teams that didn't really play great
Darn it, we lost you, and now we are back from our technical difficulties. Calen was really killing it during that break when you couldn't hear us. I mean, he was that was absolute brilliance.
Bruce cut the cord, though, right?
Did he?
It was
Before
Bruce,
we could get to the rest?
People, yeah.
Yeah, we're like heaping all the praise on the crew. We're like, this is sustainable. They're going to be here for years. They're going to move into that brand new stadium. Like the culture, the soccer in Columbus, it's a beautiful thing.
Soccer City, USA. Calen said that term.
He did. Over and over. He also vowed to never wear that hat again on air. Or did you?
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
No, I never said that. Never said that. All right, let's talk Revs. Bruce Arena said after this game that the progress this year was good, and it was. And he had basically said before that the regular season was just a crapshoot to throw out. Like, this is more really who they thought they could be. And they want to bring in 2 to 3 players that solidify that first 11 in the offseason. Players that can help in the attack. That was one of the things he focused on. Now, they do have 2 DPs in the attack, so that's an interesting statement to make. Here's the starting 11 in case somehow you didn't watch the game or forgot. Matt Turner in goal. We don't know how long his future in New England will be because it seems like there are some things swirling around him that might take him elsewhere. You have DeJuan Jones. You have Kessler, Farrell, Buchanan in the back. That seems pretty stable and secure. Polster and Caldwell in the midfield. Maybe a place to upgrade. Bunbury, Bow, Heel, and then Buxa up top. If you guys were looking at this 11 and you're parsing Bruce's words and you're thinking, okay, what's he talking about? Where is he talking about? Where would you start to pinpoint areas to improve?
Center midfield. For me, I think center midfield for them because it would take it would do a lot for Heel, which I think is their most important piece. And anything that can give him support. I thought Caldwell and Polster both did a good job. And there were times where Polster even was able to carry the ball forward, or Caldwell was able to actually connect some passes to play ahead, where he's a little bit more of a backwards and sideways possession type defender, as well as just an honest guy that's going to do the work. But I think something more along the lines of a connecting piece. So Heel wouldn't have to drop as far back to pick up the ball or drift wide or find positions, but could actually play more of a role the way that Zelarayan does, where he's not really required to be all the way up as a connector in the buildup, but somebody that can sort of take it from point A to point B, and then he can take it from there. So that's where I would look.
Don't forget that they'll have Caicedo coming back as well, the young Colombian, sort of a box-to-box midfielder, a little bit similar to Polster, maybe not quite as good on the ball, but covers a lot of ground, that type of thing. Central midfield, yeah, I understand it with Gustavo Bo. We saw him win games for the Revs in this postseason, but I do think that there's a ceiling on how high you can go with that type of player. I think that if you are going to have 60% possession and generate 15 chances a game, then okay, he makes a lot of sense. But in a game like this against a really good team who are going to push you back, you need someone in that spot. And remember, this is not supposed to be a 4-4-2. This is supposed to be a 4-2-3-1. You need someone who's willing to drop back and get on Nagbe and make Nagbe work a little bit harder. You need someone who's going to get on the ball and conduct the game a little bit and allow Heel to pick better spots and not have Heel be so disconnected from everything that's happening in the attack. So it's weird to say this because Gustavo Bo was so good in the playoffs up to this point, but to me that is the most obvious place that I think I would look for an upgrade. And I understand why that might end up feeling a little weird given what he did over the past 3 weeks.
Shouldn't it be Heel? Shouldn't they go out and get a game-changing winger to play on the right side and let Heel play underneath full-time and take away some of the offensive responsibility because you have someone who could create their own chances? Also, I think on top of all of this, you have to, I would assume for the Revs, you have to say if you thought Adam Buxa was a DP-level center forward and this year was just pure chaos, that you think he's going to be better next year. Otherwise, you have to go get a center forward. You have 2 options there. But if you think he's a player that you thought you were bringing 12 months ago, this year was weird, Bruce Arena already said 3 times throughout the regular season, all that stuff, okay, then that's your center forward. Then you need some ability to just break the game open on the wings so you don't have to get the fullbacks high, and Carlos Heel doesn't have the full responsibility. But to Doyle's point, which I agree with everything he was saying, those are all things Carlos Heel does, and he does them at a high level. That should be his spot, and you'd think they're going to spend on a defensive midfielder and bring someone in behind them, and then someone who can create the game from those wings. Christian Pinilla was hurt for most of this year.
Yeah, I was just going to say
it's not Pinilla.
I don't think he proved that over the years. Now, it would be interesting to see, and my comparison is Pedro Santos, where there was a ton of responsibility. Then you bring in better players. What can he do when he's always 1v1 and kind of people lose him a little because he likes to come inside and beat someone and curl a shot? But I would agree, if you have the chance now to go into the open market and get someone, you'd probably want to upgrade on what Pinilla brings.
I mean, look at what they had available to them today. Christian Pinilla is a guy that there's nobody like that on the bench. I mean, their attacking subs are Renix, Lee Win, Diego Fagundes, Kakuta Mane. I mean, there's not the guy that's pushing Buxa. To me, you have to go get a forward. And I think about the Portland Timbers in this sense and what they've done with their attack. I mean, they weren't just like, okay, well, we have Nisgoda. Done. Don't need, in this era of MLS, I think if you want to be an elite team, you don't just get to go sign a DP and say that, and especially a DP in Buxa's profile and performance this year, and say that's all we need.
But I think Bunbury, Bo, and Buxa are all number 9s.
Agreed.
I think they're just being played in different positions because Bruce has decided to put their best players on the pitch, and they don't really have talented wingers necessarily. So the thing that really changed for them was when they got Buchanan at right back. That gave them some width and some one-on-one ability and a little bit of ability to get out wide and spread things out. But Bunbury is doing a good job, but he's having to play as essentially like a hold-up winger where he's holding up the ball.
And defending a lot.
Yeah, and doing the dirty work. But you'd rather see him pushing where it's Buxa has a good run of form, or it's him getting a run of form, or Bo gets a run of form, and then you actually get some talented wingers that come in, can beat guys one-on-one, because that other than Buchanan, there was nobody that was going to stand anybody up one-on-one or dribble inside or cut or move in unexpected ways, draw a penalty. I mean, those are things that you ultimately need to do if you're going to find success.
The question is, if you can pay Gustavo Bo what you pay him and get the production you get from him and upgrade the team. And those are a lot of those things we don't know exactly what they have. But what's interesting to me is the amount of players they have out of the super draft. You kind of have half a starting 11 that's super affordable. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times you can see a team then sneak a TAM player in outside of that who's borderline DP level, and maybe Gustavo Bo isn't a full-time starter, is a spot starter for the right games, and then is a killer off the bench when you need him and all those things. And, you have other teams, for example, Columbus had Diaz and Pedro Santos, who were DPs. And then they slowly upgraded the roster and moved them off. And now Nagby's taken that spot, as well as Zelarayan this year. Can maybe you see something like that from New England going forward?
TBD, as you see the Revs sort of like mourn what was lost for them. How do we evaluate their year? And look, we have to include regular season. I know Bruce likes to say that didn't really count in a lot of ways, and I understand it was bizarre and any sort of massive,
but it's also
sort of
Bruce.
Sweeping takeaway is probably not.
But Bruce doesn't care, right? The Galaxy weren't built to win Supporters Shield.
Bruce is a guy that's like, hey, open cup across the country. Nah, Super Draft second round, I'm already gone.
Just getting rail hawked. He doesn't care. It doesn't matter to him. So I think what we saw in the field the last 3 weeks was what Bruce thought this team was capable of, and will in 2021 think that that's what they're capable of, whether they do it in and week out. Now I think he wants to make that attack a little younger and a little more aggressive and have more pieces. All the things they need to improve, but they're going to enter the playoffs next year with the same thought in their head this year, which is if we play well, we can beat anyone in MLS, and we can do it 3 or 4 times and go to MLS Cup. And I think this year solidifies that for them. And he walks away saying, what I do works. And he can continue to sell it up the ladder and say, I walked in the door. I said we needed a player that got Gustavo Bo. Now I need more talent. There's more players that I want. And it's shown the crafts that it works. Give me those options, and I can win in this league.
All right, we'll see what happens with the Revs. Big playoff run for them. Before we get out of here, we got to talk Loons and Sounders. That is tomorrow night, Monday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern on FS1. Of course, the pregame show is a half hour before, and then we're here immediately after FS1 goes off. Any early thoughts? The Loons have never beat the Sounders, I don't believe, and yet they're favorites. It's an incredible dichotomy. I'll just never understand it. But any sort of like overriding thoughts? What you are looking forward to? What you want to see? A lineup decision? A storyline? What interests you guys about this game? Doyle, we'll start with you and then kind of go around.
I want to see it. I actually liked the way Seattle played the other day against Dallas. I thought they were super patient in trying to break down that low block against a really good defense and weren't throwing in useless crosses. I want to see if they can show the same patience again against a Minnesota team that is probably just as good defensively, and whether they can be sharp enough to turn that into goals. And if they're not, if they get a little impatient and they start throwing in those crosses, those are counterattacking opportunities for Minnesota. And Minnesota knows that really well, and they've been annihilating teams on the counter like that, like 80 yards upfield, just off to the races with Reynoso, Lod, Molino, and Finley. So, I mean, I think that's what the game comes down to. That's where my focus is going to be.
I look at for Seattle, I think you have a steady starting lineup. The question is if Leerdam can come back in the starting lineup, it just makes them a little bit better. And then when they are in those possession moments, I think he's more talented in that final third to sometimes come underneath Jovan Jones or whoever's playing wide and kind of hit that gap between Gasper and Debasi. And I thought Debasi struggled in the first half against SKC, and that's a place where maybe you can pull that Minnesota back line out. But I think this is a game for Seattle to win. And so to Doyle's point, I think if they play like they did against Dallas and you add Leerdam and have that little bit more plus, this is a game that they should win. At the same time, Kevin Molino and Reynoso might be the two most dangerous attacking players on the field. So Minnesota's going to have opportunities, which I think that's what makes this game exciting to me.
The margins are going to be smaller for Minnesota than they were against Sporting Kansas City and against Colorado for sure. And they've given up good looks in both of those matches that they just weren't punished for. And I think Dane St. Clair has proved a lot to me throughout the playoffs, but he's going to have a tall task again, where I think he's going to have to make a couple big saves against Rui Diaz or Morris or Ladero. And how he does in those moments, I think there's a lot on his shoulders, because if they can stay in it, they have the firepower going the other direction. They can cause Seattle problems, but the margins are much smaller for Minnesota than they've been in the past.
I think the weight is also on Ozzy's shoulders and Young Gregus' shoulders. Yeah. Ozzy certainly in the sense, of what he brings to this team, but also his sort of relationship and connection with Seattle and what all that will mean to him as well. But like Ike Opara is not in this team, and I know I've gotten some flack from like Minnesota folks in my DMs over the course of this year, just saying it's not as good and it isn't going to be as good, but it's not as good and it isn't going to be as good. Like the ability to put out that fire it's not the same. And so you need the two guys in front to not just shield and put those guys in like predictable positions, but then to transition.
I think they're better in net, though. I that's what I'm saying about St. Clair.
I agree.
I think he's the one that's been their bailout valve when they've needed him so far, which is so impressive for a young player of his age.
I mean, I'm looking at Hot Boy. I just want him to have joy, man. He needs a new contract.
I think he already got paid. Settled. I think over the course of the last month, and including the MLS is back. I think the check's been written. The question is where it will be. Ooh. But I appreciate that for Kevin Molino. I also am curious to see if Ozzy Alonso just goes full Pele and halftime just changes jerseys, plays for both teams, and just gets the adoration from both sides.
If you're Columbus, you're hoping this goes to extra time, right? I mean, you're hoping this goes as long as possible.
Just bunch of red cards as well. Yeah.
By the way, Caleb Porter is having an all-timer press conference right now. He just dropped an F-bomb, so definitely go check out that one on MLSsoccer.com or wherever they have it up. All the quotes, of course. I think Charlie Boehm is doing that duty. MLSsoccer.com, that's your coverage for all these Audi 2020 MLS Cup playoffs. We will be back tomorrow night after that match between the Sounders and Minnesota United. You can watch it at 9:30 p.m. Eastern on FS1, but you can also get all the pregame, all the knowledge. Who's dropping it? Are you on tomorrow, Calen? Is it you and Doyle? Is it Charlie? Who's jumping in on this thing?
Taquito, just
I don't know. I think I'm on it.
It's Calen, Susan, and Charlie. I'm not on pregame duty tomorrow.
Wow. Yeah, well,
you came in hot today, though.
I came in hot.
Yeah, after all that back padding, they just like, I was going to say, Doyle. He's getting a little too big for his britches right now.
Based off today, I would assume most people don't watch the game. They tune in for the pregame show. They find out what's going to happen, and then they come back in for the postgame.
Honestly, just put me and Calen on for 15 minutes. We'll tell you everything that's going to happen. Turn off the TV. Relax.
Perfect. All right, we'll see you tomorrow.
Congratulations, Adrian Heath.
If you are an Extra Time listener, the podcast, we've been doing those as basically simulcasts between our post-game shows and then straight into the pod. That will be the same for tomorrow. So when 5 p.m. Eastern hits and you get that little itch and you're like, where's my Extra Time, well, it'll be coming.
And we got USMNT, so we've got MLS Cup and USMNT.
Oh yeah, on Wednesday.
Same show.
On Wednesday. What a week! And then MLS Cup after that. Incredible. Again, just to remind you, since you're already here, December 12th, Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, Fox Unimas Turia and TSN TV. That's MLS Cup, the 25th edition. It's been a crazy year. These playoffs are almost over. 2 games left. Stick with us. Enjoy them. Enjoy your night, everybody. We'll see you real soon.